Welcome to this live session of Coatings Talk. I'm your host, Jim Kunkel. I'm a certified protective coating specialist. For the last 15 years, I've worked in the global protective coatings industry. Here on Coatings Talk, you'll find the latest information and industry best practices for the global protective coatings and corrosion industries, as well as interviews with professionals like CM who make coatings and corrosion interesting. This live broadcast and all content and materials produced and distributed by Coatings Talk and myself does not represent or reflect any positions or opinions of Akzo Nobel International. During this live broadcast, you'll have the opportunity to post comments that I can include into this episode. And I'm so very grateful to have on Coatings Talk Mr. C.M. Nelson from TRC and master instructor, if I can call you a master instructor, which in my book you are, of the spring 2024 Pittsburgh Tri-State Rectifier School, which is running March 12th to 13th. And it's being hosted by NiSource at their training center in Monaca, Pennsylvania. CM, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. And, you asked if it was okay if you call me master. That's certainly a lot better than some things people have called me.
You know what, before we start talking, maybe you could provide a little background about yourself and, how long you've been as an instructor for the Rectifier School.
Okay. So I've been in and around the pipeline and corrosion business now for 42 years. Spent first several years working for an operator down in South Texas, and then transitioned and spent 3.5 decades running a corporation building CP equipment, custom design CP equipment. And now for the last almost 4 years, I've been with TRC. I'm a senior technical advisor, do the trainings and obviously, and do consulting both internally in-house with our engineers and externally with clients. And I've been doing training classes now for 39 years. I'll kind of count 2020. I did get 3 schools in before COVID knocked it out, but we're slowly climbing back and wound up. I've done my last one for this year, and I've knocked out 19 for 2023.
Oh, God bless you. You and I really through Mike Lamont got introduced, and I've known you from relatively around the pandemic time. You've participated in some of the content that I do, and I greatly appreciate it. And one thing I wanted to let you know, and also too, I've expressed this to all the viewers and subscribers and people that follow a lot of my content, is that corrosion topics on YouTube, for example, they outpace the coatings topics 3-1. So one of my focuses for 2024 is to get more heavily involved in corrosion topics and talk about science and other things related to corrosion. As much as I talk about coatings, I need to talk about that as well. What's kind of cool about the AMP chapter system is that we have the Steel City chapter. You and I were talking about some of the other chapters for AMP that are here domestically in the United States. And a lot of the initiatives that they're doing, including doing training and courses such as a rectifier course. And I think it's real important that now that we're almost done with this year, but March is going to come up quick. And there's a lot of interest out there regarding this. But I wanted to take time to do kind of an overview. And I thought the best thing to do is for you and I to kind of talk a little bit about what is covered during this time at the Rectifier School. And, the first thing regarding in the introduction is, basic corrosion fundamentals. And I'm sure what you're doing is doing more of a 101 type of overview. Is that correct?
Yeah. I tell people all the time, if you followed me around through all the classes that I do every year, I start every class at the same place. I end every class at the same place. The in-between points in that day and a half are very, very different. Just this year, I did a class for an operator, and it really was good for keeping me on my toes because the least experienced person in the room had been doing corrosion for 15 years. So we dove off in the weeds. Conversely, I just did one a month ago. I had 8 people in the room that had been in corrosion for less than a month. So The class varies based on the people that I have, their knowledge, their experience, and I've learned that the best thing to do is just let's kind of review some basics at the very beginning, so that everybody's at least on the same base level. For senior experienced people, it might be kind of a, yeah, I know this already, but just get everybody on the same level. And then from there, it's really a class driven curriculum. We're going to cover the topics. Safety is going to be the big topic. And it's the same no matter whether you're a newbie or a 40-year vet. But then, it's an interactive class. They're going to participate so that I know, what kind of problems do you have? What kind of equipment do you have? Corrosion and CP problems in a tank farm are different than corrosion and CP problems in an offshore environment. What is it that the audience has? What is it that they need? And the bottom line thing that I tell them all, if you walk out of this class after a day and a half and there's a subject I didn't touch on, it's your fault because you didn't bring it up. That's why it needs to be interactive. But we're going to basically cover all of the big safety topics, and then helping people understand rectifiers, how they work, what they do, and how to figure out the problems. Because there are far too many instances now that people are getting thrown out there with little to no training and figure it out. And they flounder.
Yeah, what I like about the approach is that when you have a class, let's see, 20 to 25 in a class, I believe is typically the size
Correct.
of it. You really don't know exactly what level of experience or hands-on or in the field activity they have. They could be a large group of somebody, like you said, have a month or so or short period of time in. What I
Sure.
like
And
about this, good.
well, no, and you also are running into another problem in that, unfortunately, there's a lot of operators out there in management, upper management, that, hey, we're downsizing or we're reallocating assets. Jim, you were working with our electrical guys. Corrosion's electricity. We're putting you in corrosion. Well, you may have been with the company 15, 20 years, but you're in your second week of doing corrosion.
Yeah, that typically happens both in the corrosion industry and the coatings industry. We don't grow up and say, "Mama, I want to be a CP person, or I want to be a protective coating specialist." We're kind of thrusted into it and saying, "Hey, you're now the coatings guy. You're the corrosion guy." So I do really like that approach that you have on it, because you're really kind of tailoring the course based on, again, what's the median? Where do we need to go at? And some people who are experienced, they can kind of back up a little bit. But also, too, I think it gives them an opportunity to kind of refresh their knowledge, but maybe they share some of their experience and things like that. Safety, like you said, is such a big important. You're talking about shocks and burns. You're really covering those. And then you're also covering the electrical hazards when you're dealing with the environment around you. As much as we want to be concerned about safety with the equipment, what about your site surroundings? Maybe you're not in you're out exposed in a certain area. You got to be careful and things like that. So I do really like that approach. And then, the next thing, what I kind of wanted to go into on the, let me see if I can get this to move forward here. Here we go. Is on the troubleshooting. This is pretty interesting. And the reason why I think it's interesting is that you were actually going to take the rectifier. And again, you said this is hands-on. You're breaking it down to its components. Is that correct?
Exactly. The as I tell people when I'm doing these classes, there are a lot of, I'll call them, errors that I see people in the field make. I've been watching it happen for 4 decades.
Mm-hmm.
There's, number one, first and foremost, there's a whole lot of people don't understand what that box does. In my former life, I used to get phone calls. Somebody'd say, "I got a problem with the rectifier." Okay, what do you got? Well, I let all the black magic voodoo smoke out of the box. That was the extent. They didn't know. And I really try to get this to a point where people understand there's a systematic flow. And once you can learn to follow that, it can really be fairly simple. I'll tell you this. I had a guy walk up to me after a class I taught in September, and he literally walked up to me after the class and said, "You know, before I got in this class, I didn't understand how this thing works, but now that I do, this is really not that hard." And I looked at him and went, "Shh, don't tell anybody."
Yeah, don't tell your boss.
Yeah.
And to your point earlier, like you said, a lot of people, they're going to be reprioritized. They might move into a different role, which would get them into this. I think for people who are managers or, even if you're involved in the sales side or business development, it's good to know this because you're going to be working with clients that you're going to be talking about the services that your company can provide. And part of this is going to be, troubleshooting and maintenance of rectifiers, if not installing it. And to your point, I think you had mentioned about, kind of breaking into the components is that, you're dealing with, multiple manufacturers, but, for the most part, if you understand the fundamentals of it and you understand how the components do work, what the potentials are if they're not properly maintained, or maybe when they're going through a maintenance, if they're not properly installed, what type of hazards could exist and what type of potential troubleshooting could arise if you don't do things properly. And the other thing too, I think, is the testing. I know part of the requirement is they have to bring, I believe, their own meter and PPE. The meter is used basically, I guess, to test the connectivity of the different components. Is that what it is?
Well, we use it in a lot of different facets, and really the hands-on troubleshooting. I can't tell you how many thousands of people I've had make the statement to me, "Yeah, the day and a half, the lecture, the discussion, it was great. I learned a lot, but man, the hands-on is when the light bulbs really went off. That when I could get in there and when I could do it, instead of listening to somebody talk to me about it or I sit and watch them do it, I got to get in there. You let me make some fumblings, but didn't let me fumble too far. And then now all of a sudden, I see it. It's like somebody's shown a floodlight into the darkness. I get it. I understand."
Yeah, seeing is believing, but I think you learn so much more with hands-on than just strict lecture. I mean, you are an amazing instructor. People definitely pay attention to you, but I think to your point, and the point I'm trying to make is that it's great to have a great instructor, but also to the instructor that takes time, shows you how to break things down and rebuild it. Because when you do that, you're more invested into it when you have to kind of tear something down, rebuild it, and you understand exactly what each component does and how they all operate together. On the day two, is really interesting. And the reason why I say that is that you've created an outline that also you're going to review the day one, but it's going to be an open forum Q&A, and you're going to be talking about the topics that were covered and also the material that was covered. How important is it to a class to start off that second day with an open forum and a Q&A?
Oh, I think it's huge, and especially when we're talking about some of these that may have less experience. Uh, I've had people tell me that that first day, this is coming from some of the less experienced people. That first day, it can be somewhat like drinking water out of a fire hose. I'm pouring a lot of information out there, and I think it's one of the things that it's how I would learn best. I've got out of the class the first day. I've gone, I've eaten, I've thought about it. Maybe I'm thinking about it again in the morning, and it ranges. Maybe there's some topics we already covered, but you just need a little bit more explanation or a little better clarity, or I didn't cover something that, hey, you haven't gotten around to this. Typically, when that question comes, it's because it's the second day and we're getting ready to get into it after the Q&A. But whatever the case may be, I mean it sincerely. When they walk out after a day and a half, if there's anything that they have not had covered, it's going to be their own fault because they didn't bring it up.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a really good way to kind of gauge exactly, where everyone is. If are we all on the same page, and to move forward. And then the part of the second day goes into hands on, where you have a member, the class members are participating in the troubleshooting, of a defective rectifier, and then also to, working on individual units. And the good thing is with this rectifier school this March is that we do have industry involvement where we do have some rectifiers being donated for use for the training session. So we're going to have a really good hands-on part of this as well. Let's move on and talk about the kind of wrapping things up here. And what I was interested here to kind of talk with you a little bit about is getting into, questions and answers. Because I know the thing is, at the end of this, those who earn, they're going to get a certificate from this course. So what type of depth or level of questions are you asking the participants?
It's really going to be them. The class winds up generating the questions.
Okay.
And it really, it goes back to the example I gave. That one class I did where everybody in there was so experienced. Hey man, we got off in some deep, weird. You may go through your whole career and not ever see it happen, but this guy had it happen. All right, well, let's dissect it. Let's break it down. Let's all learn from it. And then when I've got a class that has maybe a lesser amount of experience, they're typically things that are evolving around once they've gone through the hands-on troubleshooting of both components and the equipment, realizing I still didn't really get how that connected to this, or can you just help me clarify, or that happened. How do you know that's what it was? And so, it's about increasing their comfort level. And I'll tell you this too. A lot of different companies have different attitudes. I work with several operators that they have me come and do training for their people every year or every other year because they understand in that lag since I was there last, you've hired new people have retired, people transferred in. And the guy that or girl that they did take the class 2 years ago, at the end of the day, any knowledge, and this doesn't just apply to rectifiers or corrosion, it applies to anything. Knowledge is something that you use it or lose it. We have evolved, thankfully, to a time in our industry where most of the manufacturers out there are putting out good, reliable, dependable products. And we've done a good job of educating more and more of our personnel about safety and grounding and protections. And so the reality is you're a corrosion technician that probably has 8 to 18 or 28 different things you got to do during the course of the year. And you're fortunate that you may only work on a rectifier twice a year. It's hard to get good at something when you only do it twice a year.
That's a good point. One other thing too, before as we're kind of showing wrap up and close, the one thing also I want to stress everyone, if you're an engineer or you're involved, like, anything related to cathodic protection, even as a project manager, there are PDHs that this course comes with, correct? CM,
Correct.
correct in that?
And not only for those people, but also for your CIP and CP AMP certified personnel.
There you go.
They have to acquire so many PDH for their renewals. And I can verify NACE accepts it, or I'm sorry, Old Habit AMP accepts it.
So that's also a good point too, that not only are we really looking for people that might be working in the field to do this work, also too, people who can join this could be, they could be managers, they could be engineers, they could be anybody associated with it who are also looking for some professional development. This is a good opportunity. And, before I kind of go into the commercial part of this, the kind of push for for people to register, CM, is there anything that we didn't talk about regarding the rectifier school that's coming up in March that you would want to talk about?
No, the only two things is obviously appreciation to the Steel City chapter for organizing it. Really appreciate NiSource for allowing us to use their training facility. That's just huge. And just kind of putting a top on what you just said, I did another class for an operator and they wound up having some of their corrosion engineers and project managers take the class. And I found it very gratifying that at the end of the class, those are the ones that were talking that, man, why wasn't I required to take this class back when I just got started? Because we're not just going to limit ourselves to here's a rectifier, it's broken, fix it. We're talking in the general CP and also what problems your rectifiers may cause to another pipeline operator or someone else or somebody else's CP equipment that's causing problems to you. And so we talk in a bigger, broader range than just here, this is how you fix this piece of equipment.
Yeah, it's a good point. So now that we've kind of talked a little bit about the outline, the course, what's covered, let me give the commercial part of this. This rectifier course, we're calling it the Steel City chapter, but it's also considered a Pittsburgh tri-state. So again, wide area of people we can pull from. It's going to be this upcoming March 12th and 13th. And registration, you can pre-register or get information by emailing steelcity@ampchapter.org. That's steelcity@ampchapter.org. The cost per student is $300. That's an incredible value for it. And like CM had mentioned, NiSource, we do have other people who are sponsoring location, equipment, and things like that. But also, too, the chapter is looking for people to sponsor lunches. We would like to have lunches sponsored so that we can keep people on the site, at the training center, and to be able to maybe even extend conversations and networking opportunities. So if anyone is interested in becoming a sponsor for lunch or beverages and things like that, again, just email the steelcity@ampchapter.org. And then what we'll do is once we pre-register, we have people that we'll get a registration information out to them and make sure that everything's all set up and everything like that. Okay, so as I'm heading out, let me mention that Coatings Talk has now a LinkedIn group. And on that LinkedIn group, we're building a very strong community of coatings and corrosion professionals and others who support both industries. The community purpose is to share members' experience, expertise, information, knowledge, passion, skills, and more. So please consider joining the Coatings Talk community. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with new members. And hopefully that includes you if you're not a member. So join me next time as I continue our Coatings Talk to dive deeper into topics such as coatings, technology, surface preparation, coating application, quality inspection, corrosion, and more. And don't hesitate to subscribe to the Coatings Talk channel to stay updated on the latest episodes. I greatly, greatly appreciate all the support in 2024 and 23 and working hard on 2024. Really looking forward to that. And here's a message for you, Sam. Thank you very much. I agree. He is the best.
Well, thank you, Jim, for putting this on and to the Steel City AMP chapter. And anybody that's listening, if you know people that are in the corrosion world, whether they are contractors, major operators, small municipal utility people, I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't benefit.
There you go. Okay. Thank you so much. And please have a great evening, afternoon, morning, no matter where in the world you're watching this. Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank y'all.